Okay, all right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another webinar. My name is Aaron Essery. I am the Assistant Extension Specialist for Viticulture and Enology at Oklahoma State. And today we're going to talk about planting grapevines and early year training. Cool. So planting grapes. It all kind of depends with site selection and site preparation. But once you have a site and you find a good spot, you do a soil test, you do a water test, we're ready to go. So this is kind of where we're starting. So the first thing, you just want to disc the land and uproot all grasses, make it a bare field as you would for farming. Grasses compete with water and nutrients for that matter. So the less vegetative competition you have for grapes, at least the young grapes, the better. Have your end posts and middle row posts in place, and at least have the bottom half of the trellis in place too. Irrigation is essential. What I mean by bottom half of the trellis is essentially your irrigation line. I really highly recommend having that in place before you plant. So this is a picture of a newly planted vineyard somewhere out in Oregon. You can see they have their end posts in place, 3 feet in the ground. They have their inline posts, which is your middle row post every 12 to 14 to 16 feet. And then they have their irrigation line, and I think they do have their cordon wire in place as well. The top half of the trellis is not built, and that's okay in the first year because the grapevines are not going to reach the top of the trellis anyway. So these were just planted. You can see those plant protectors. Every little plant protector is a grapevine. So this is a newly planted vineyard. Irrigation is in place, end post and row post are in place, and then you just go through and you plant your vines. So this is what it looks like just after planting. Okay, so your grapevines, 2 forms you can buy your grapes, either as bare root cuttings or as screen potted plants. And I've worked with both of them. There's no right or wrong. They're just different ways to do it. Bare root cuttings, which are on the right, as you see, are easier to handle, if that's okay to say. They're dormant and they're essentially live sticks. You can bundle them up, you can carry them around. They're much more durable, a little bit more hardy. Whereas green potted plants are already green, they're already actively growing. There's no wrong or right, they're just different. But green potted plants take up a little more space too. As you see the picture on the right, that's a bundle of probably 25, whereas the bottom picture, 25 in the green potted plants are much more spaced out. So just however you want to do it, there's no wrong or right. Okay, so we'll start with bare root cuttings. Let's say we're going to order bare root cuttings. So this is a very common way of ordering and planting. Some are grafted, some are own rooted. When you go to order at the nursery, that's your choice. You can either have the vine own rooted, which means it uses its natural root, or the nursery can graft a special rootstock on for you. It takes longer if you want a grafted vine, but it's just, again, it's your soil, it's your site, it's your environment, it's however you want to do it. There's no right or wrong. Now, when these come in though, let's say you get your vines, that's what I want, they ship, they're in. Before you plant them, it's good to soak them in a bucket of water before planting. At least 3 hours, 12 hours is better, half a day. Probably not more than 24 hours, So let's say if you were going to plant Saturday morning, you might want to put these in a bucket of water Friday evening, and then, before you go to sleep. So that way the next day you wake up, they're ready to go. That just helps, since they are dormant, that helps kind of activate the root system. It soaks up a little bit of water. It just gets them ready, to be put in the ground. And then also you'll notice this wax that's on the vines. That just helps with orientation. So the wax will always be the scion. That's your growing portion. So the wax end is going to be the growing part. So don't plant that in the ground. Plant the roots in the ground. And you can scrape it off. You don't have to. It's probably the wax will probably just come off in the shuffle of carrying the vines around. But it's just something the nursery does for direction of orientation. All right. Green potted vines. So this is another common way of ordering and planting vines. I've done this too. I like green potted vines because they're already growing. It's nice to see them, and they're a bit easier to work with. There's no need to pre-soak them either because they're already in an established soil media. So you can put them in some water. Well, even if you plant them, you should water them as you plant them, but you just pop them in the ground, fill it with soil, and then give it some water, and they're on their way. So have irrigation in place before you plant. I can't stress this enough. So even if you have to just lay the drip line on the ground and build things up later, have a way to irrigate. Because if you plant 1 acre, depending on the spacing, 1 acre is about is just less than 1,000 vines. So if you're trying to hand water 1,000 vines, that can be daunting. So let's say you do have your irrigation in place, you're ready to plant. It's best to dig the holes as you go. So you do have to dig a hole about 6, 7, 8, 9 inches deep, about 4 inches wide. Post hole diggers actually work great for this, but it's also tiring digging with post hole diggers after so long. So you can, if you have a tractor, you can buy something called an auger that mounts onto the tractor, and it's just easy way to dig your holes. But I say dig the holes as you go, because if you dig them days in advance, the wind and the sunlight and everything will kind of callus the edges of the holes. Does that make sense? Especially we have wind here in Oklahoma. If I dig a hole and I'll say I'll come back 2 days later and plant it, that hole I dug might be wind whipped. The moisture is going to be out, the soil is going to be drier. It'll be slightly callous too. So it is best to fill in the holes with grapes as you dig them. Just FYI. Now to plant a grapevine, essentially, it's just like planting anything else. You put the vine in the hole. Now make sure you push the roots downward, especially those dormant cuttings that we saw. Put the vines in the hole, push the roots downward, backfill with soil, fill it up with soil, and then always recommend gently tugging upward on the vine just to ensure that the roots are facing downward. Because sometimes what will happen, you get something called J-rooting. And that's bad news. J-rooting is when the vine gets crammed into the hole, and the roots want to come up. They call that a J-root. And that will essentially strangle and kill the vine over time. So just be wary of that. Never J-root, especially if you have volunteers or even paid help to help you plant your vine. Tell them about this. Say, hey, I need those vines, the roots need to be facing downward. You don't want to just cram them in the hole, fill them with dirt, because then there's roots sticking up and they'll essentially suffocate themselves. So just be wary of that. Yeah, bad news. Don't J-root your grapevines. Okay, here's just a couple pictures. Kind of just some contrast. The top left is kind of just a home backyard vineyard, maybe an acre. You see a bunch of probably friends and family volunteers out helping plant. They do have their irrigation in place, as you see that black line going across. A little bit high for my taste, but I've seen it 2 feet off the ground. It's no big deal. But you see that all their holes are dug, their middle line posts are in place, their end posts are in place, their irrigation lines in place, and they're just going through and planting their vineyard. And surely all those holes will be filled, because you don't want to leave your holes empty for days at a time. The bottom right picture is a large vineyard, almost guaranteed a commercial vineyard. But you see, they have nothing in place. They have absolutely no trellis. They will likely go back and rebuild the trellis. But they do, if you see next to this first closest row, they do have that black tube laying on the ground. That's most definitely an irrigation line. So at least they set their irrigation in place. But this is just the top left picture is probably the more proper way to do it. The bottom right picture is, at the same time, a commercial vineyard probably has the labor and resources to go back and retrofit a trellis. But again, just two different ways to do it. So let's talk about plant protectors. Before I get in, does anybody have any birding questions just off the bat? Unmute yourself. You can ask a quick question. No? Okay. All right, I'll proceed. So plant protectors. Yes.
I'm sorry.
You're okay.
You might have already covered it. I kind of came in late, but some of the vines that we've received, the roots were like 2 foot long. And did you talk about trimming the roots?
No, that's an excellent point. Yes, sometimes you can trim. Is that what you did with yours?
Yes, yes, definitely.
So
Yeah.
yeah, trimming the root, you can kind of cut it to, oh, I don't know, what do you recommend? 6, 8 inches, maybe
Yes.
somewhere in there, and that makes it compact. So it is okay to trim the roots. Thank you, Cynthia.
Yeah, Aaron, this is Dan Montreal. I have a quick question. Sorry, I couldn't get off mute quite fast enough. So you're saying, I know you soak the vines in water for 3 to 12 hours. Do you recommend any kind of root stimulant or any other additive to that, or just plain water?
I've always used plain water. I've never used a stimulant per se.
Okay,
I have heard of people putting mycorrhizae fungus in the holes, but that's more of a biological, stimulant. It's not like a rooting hormone. But
right.
I've always just used water.
Okay, all right.
And we did the first year that we planted, it was we were having really, really hot summers that back in 2010, 2011. And we received from AA I can't remember what it was called, but it you put it in the water and it coated the roots. And so when you planted them, they had this kind of a gel around the roots, which I guess contained water.
Yeah, I would imagine probably helps from desiccation.
Yeah, yeah. So something like that, is useful as well, because those vines didn't suffer at all that summer, and I'm not sure we didn't have our irrigation set up at that point when we started. So
Well, you
Cindy,
survived because your vineyard's beautiful.
yeah, vineyard's beautiful. Hey,
Okay,
so Cindy,
we gotta proceed. Wait till questions.
okay,
Thank you. Okay,
sorry.
you're all right. Plant protectors. So these are something that are usually used during planting. They help protect the vines against wind and herbicide. I mean, and I say herbicide because as the summer goes along, you have to spray your weeds next to your baby vines, and if you have these plant protectors on them, you can nip the plant protector with herbicide, and it's okay. Anyway, so they're good. They also help stimulate the growth of the grapevine. They create a little greenhouse effect, and it pushes growth, quicker and usually a little bit stronger. They are not necessary. You don't have to use them, but I do recommend using them. I think they're a good thing. And now they do add cost to your operation. They're about 30 cents per plant protector. You see, so if you're ordering 1,000 vines, that's another $300 in plant protectors, if my math is correct. But I think they're worth it. And the nurseries will sell these to you. So the nurseries usually have plant protectors in stock. They can either be plastic or cardboard. But they're a good thing to use. All you do is you plant the grapevine, put the plant protector around it, and you're good to go. Okay, training stakes. This is something that's not to be overlooked as well. So the grapevines do need something to cling to until they reach the cordon wire, which will usually be the first or second year. They usually reach the cordon wire in the second year, so they need the stake in the first 2 years, is what I'm saying. Metal rebar and even bamboo works really good. I've seen twine. Some people do use twine. They'll drip a piece of twine from the cordon wire down to the vine. It does work, I guess, but bamboo or rebar is usually better. And then, like I say, training stakes, they just help support the vine in the first couple years of growth. So spacing. This is a question that I do get quite a bit, is how should I space my vines? And what's the rows? What's the space? Well, commercially, pretty much just standard across the board is 9 foot by 5 foot spacing. That's 9 foot between rows and 5 foot between spacing. But you can kind of do it however you want. A good way also is to measure your tractor. So if you have a 7 foot tractor, just go 1 more foot, make an 8 foot row. But again, 9 by 5 is the norm. Again, tighter spacing is more vines per acre. So if you are, if real estate is high where you are, if land is a limiting factor, you can bring your vines in even tighter. There is something called a high density vineyard, and that's when you plant your vines really tight, usually 4 foot by 4 foot, you know, in between vines, but that's not very, I say it's not common. People do it, but it's only for the brave of heart. You really, and there's usually no trellis too. So I've never seen one in person. I would like to walk through a high density vineyard. But the vines just grow on the stake, they're head trained, and they're like 4 foot by 4 foot by 4 foot apart in every direction. And you have to manually do everything. I mean, you can't drive a tractor in a high density vineyard because the vines are too close together. But it is something, maybe just for fun, you can kind of put, you know, maybe a 20 foot by 20 foot area like this, but I don't know. Commercially, 9 foot by 5 foot is the norm. So we'll talk about training here for the first 3 years. So in the first year, also called first leaf. So in the vine industry, people will say leaf, first year, second leaf. The first leaf is the first year. This is the year of planting. So if you plant your vines in 2024, they are on first leaf. So if they're on first leaf, really you just let them grow as they wish. You're just growing, they're just photosynthesizing, they're just gaining energy, they're just putting all those carbohydrates into their roots and their shoots, and they're just growing like little babies. You really don't need to train them just yet. You just kind of just let them grow. What you do want to do is keep the weeds in check, and then do keep them irrigated. They will likely be cut back come dormancy. I know it seems counterintuitive, but you're going to let your vines grow up for 1 year, and then come winter, you're going to cut them back to the ground. It's common practice, but that's for the next year. They're going to come back even stronger. In rare occasions, do you begin training on the first year? If they're really strong growers and it's, you know, just everything's going perfect, you can start training them to the cordon, but that's more of an exception than the standard. Also, in the first year, about October, maybe late September, you want to start removing your plant protectors too. So the plant protectors are only used in the first year from planting until the fall. And then about late summer, early fall, you want to pull your plant protectors off to get them acclimated to the colder weather. So second year or second leaf, this is when cordon training usually happens. So after the first year, it's common to cut them back to the ground. So on second leaf, they come back even stronger, and they'll shoot up quicker and stronger in the second year. And what you'll do is, so once they start growing, let's say this is a VSP, you know, vertical shoot positioning trellis. Once they start growing and they reach the cordon wire, you're going to want to snip them, like cut the vine just below the cordon wire. And what that's going to do is help push lateral growth. And then from there, you'll train the strongest, most lateral shoots as your cordon. So that's how you train a vine in the second year. You let it grow up to the cordon wire. You cut it just below the cordon wire, maybe 4 inches or so. And then you'll see laterals. You'll see your push lateral growth, and that's how you train your cordons with the strongest, next closest lateral. You do that to get rid of apical dominance, because in that growing tip is the growing apical meristem of the grapevine. You know, every plant has an apical meristem somewhere. And in grapes, it's a very, very terminal shoot. Well, when you snip the terminal shoot, you take away apical dominance, and that allows the laterals to all grow equally strong. And that's the idea of establishing a cordon. You want your highest, closest, strongest laterals to be your cordons. Don't simply bend the vine onto the wire. A lot of people make that mistake. They see it growing and then they just bend it on. Well, you never took it. Well, what it is that growing apical dominant tip is still the strongest, and it's just going to keep growing and growing, and you're going to have a little spindly shoot coming off for your other cordon. So snip it and then train your laterals. And also never wrap the vine around the wire either. People make that mistake. What you want to do is simply tie it. So there's tie tape is just like green little tie tape for plants and for vines. But you just find a good lateral shoot, you tie it to the cordon wire, and then that's that's how you start establishing your cordons. Okay, third year or third leaf. So by the third year, so let's say the vines go dormant again, you don't cut it back all the way, but you do trim it a little. Now by third leaf, your cordons are usually established, and now spur placement takes priority. You see, so this is a very young cordon that's just shooting out and it's starting to establish spurs. Spurs are kind of semi-permanent structures that every year's growing shoots will come off of. So for those who didn't know, a grapevine only produces fruit on that season's growth. So new growth will produce fruit. You have to train the vine to have new, young green growing tissue every year to produce fruit. So I mean, that's why vines are trained, and that's why they're thinned heavily. So you see, we have a very young cordon here. We have shoots growing out. These shoots are going to be green, and they're going to produce fruit. You can see little cluster primordia if you look close enough. So they're going to produce fruit. At the end of the year, when we go to cut these vines back for fourth leaf, this new growing green tissue will lignify up, become wood, and I'll cut that down to the nub and make a spur, you see, and then from that spur, next season's growth is going to come. So that's why it's really important to kind of know the physiology of a grapevine. And I say that spurs are semi-permanent because they can change with time, but it's also hard to change them because it does take years to get new good spur placement. So if you establish your cordons well early and you establish your spurs well early on, you're really setting yourself up for success, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh year down the road. Since the vines do lignify, they become wood. Know when and where to make your cuts. Again, that's important. Know how to count buds, know where spur placement should be, know really what you're doing, because it takes time to really kind of set new spurs. But sometimes you do happen. And every 10 years or so, you probably should lay down a new cordon. The vine does kind of, I don't know, gets old and peters out a little bit. So new cordons are common every decade or so. But that's kind of how you do it in the first few years. So with that, I say enjoy your vineyard. And now we can open it up to questions. So if you will, just unmute yourself and you're free. Let me stop the recording and we will have a Q&A.